Wow, what is your name and where do you live?
My name is Jonathan. I live in Canberra, Australia.
My name is Jacob. I live and work in London.
My name is Louis. I live in Margate, Florida, United States.
Okay, so I am Kirsten and I live in Texas.
My name is Frances Fuller, and I live in Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Ivana, and I'm originally from the Republic of Serbia, but I'm currently living in London in the United Kingdom.
I am Raven, and I live in New Jersey.
Hi, my name is Philip, and I live in Melbourne, Australia. I am a logistics and warehouse manager for an interior styling company down here in Melbourne. Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game that exists in the imaginations of its players. It is governed by a dungeon master who applies the game rules to the actions of the players, implemented by chance in the form of various dice rolling to help determine options and likelihood and successes or failures of actions or interactions. The players can set or can be set goals or endgame scenarios, and they interact with this world, the characters within it, and each other as they play. There can be maps or small set pieces, but if you're limited, it can just take place in the minds of its players from the Dungeon Master's description. Each player needs to act within the boundaries of the character, which is laid out with limitations by race, class, physical and mental facets, and character development. Experience is earned to become more powerful along the initial character path, which can branch off at higher levels. Combat is quite regimented by rule sets, and players need to be pretty familiar with their capabilities to play effectively.
I work as a bartender at a West End theatre in the evenings, but in the daytime, I'm an unemployed actor, and I'm trying to turn that into being an employed actor, mainly working in voiceover. I think the most elegant way to describe what a Dungeon Master does is John Cleese at one point in an interview, I think, talked about his process of creating material for the show Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he said that being creative isn't just about being free, it's about being free within a structure. You have to give yourself structure in order to then go crazy inside of that and make cool, like, make something interesting, create an interesting story. So, on the one hand, you have the Dungeon Master's Guide, you have the Player's Manual, you have the rules of the game, which govern basically the rules of the universe in which you're playing, the world in which you're playing. You have the rules on one hand. On the other hand, you have the players who have characters who want to achieve something and who will try different things and try and be creative and basically push the boundaries of this world. The Dungeon Master is the mediator between the two. He has to make sure that the characters can go out and do the things they want to do in this imaginary world, but he has to give them limitations. And he has to make sure they do it in a way that's interesting and challenging, because when you think about it, if you have total freedom in telling a story together, if you have absolutely no limitations, it's going to get really boring really fast, because everybody's going to have their own idea of what they want to do. Everybody's going to decide that they have this perfect way to do it, and then it'll all be really easy. And it's just not fun that way. What makes it fun is the fact that there are difficulties, there are limitations, there are weaknesses that your character has, there are problems in the world that make, you know, your characters getting to their goals more difficult. But once you actually get past all of that, once you find a way to be smart or be strong or be well equipped enough or well prepared enough or brave enough to brave this world and the difficulties that are in there, and you get past them and you get, you know, you solve the quest, you save the princess, you retrieve the diamonds, whatever your job is inside of that world, whatever your goal is, when you do it, in spite of all of those difficulties, it feels really rewarding, and it gives you a real sense of accomplishment, and that's what makes the game really fun, and that, I think, is what makes a really good DM, someone who will let you do really cool stuff, but you have to earn doing the really cool stuff, and it's the earning that then makes it all really worthwhile in the end.
Basically an assistant buyer for a luxury linen company. We sell really fancy bed sheets and towels and robes and all kinds of linens. So as a player, I know that the decisions I make are going to affect how the story develops. And I can be a good guy, I could be a bad guy, I could be completely chaotic and random, but if it makes sense for my character and the story, then it's okay. It's hard sometimes for players who are new to kind of get into the role-playing aspect of playing the game, but because they think that you have to do voices, or they're just not as comfortable in social settings. And when I first started playing, I totally get that. But as you play more, I actually find that if you're willing to put yourself out there, you get really exciting and stupid and amazing scenarios that never had happened in real life. But if you're willing to put yourself out there and make decisions and talk to people and interact with NPCs or non-player characters, then that's when you get the really memorable game experiences.
My occupation is a 911 call taker, specifically the medical portion of 911 calls. The story develops, it's cooperative. So your character reacts one way based on how you've reacted. The other characters are going to take certain actions, and your DM is then going to take certain actions based on how all of you have behaved, have all of the choices that you've made, your dice rolls, and just where you decide you're going in your story. So you've got your world, and you've typically got multiple towns or countries, and based on the information you're given, you decide where your story is going. And your DM kind of helps build the story around your DM builds an outline of the story, and you give it all of the meat. You create the protagonists. Roll20 is a platform online for those of us to play D&D in the comfort of our own home, but also so that you can join groups of people who are all over the world and all over the country. So you can get a lot of people from a lot of different areas together and play it on this platform, rather than being limited to just your local area and your local friends. So for people like me, who a lot of my friends are spread across the country, just as our careers have taken us and lives have kind of separated us, we can still get together on this online platform and play.
Where I am a retail customer assistant, part-time retail customer assistant. The game is largely played out through improvised acting. The DM will normally start things off by narrating the environment and the situation, and the players will say what their characters intend to do to affect the situation, to make changes, to resolve a conflict or to something like that. Normally it'll be resolving a conflict of some kind, whether with swords or words. They will then roll a dice, normally 20-sided, in Dungeons & Dragons, and they will add a modifier representing their character's strengths or weaknesses, trying to beat a static number that the Dungeon Master may or may not have told them. Depends on the game you're running. Depending on the result, the action will succeed or fail, and the DM will narrate the consequences, and the story will move on from there. And through this, you will tell the story pace by pace, and then through through these actions, the player characters will proceed through the story, which can then be strung together in multiple sessions to form a longer form, what's called a campaign, which is just a series of stories, series of episodes, effectively, knitted together. Since D&D is a game, that implies that there is a win condition, and there is a win and a loss condition. I mentioned that one of the campaigns I run, they actually lost that campaign. The exact nature of the win or loss condition will change with each story, but it tends to be some flavour of beat the bad guy, save the day. This gets us to an important point. Every game is different. This is the thing that makes Dungeons & Dragons and tabletop RPGs very difficult to describe, because every table is different. Every Dungeon Master and every player has a different way of approaching the game and a different style. And part of what makes this so good is seeing how all that pans out. You will get some games, some campaigns will be highly character-focused, very acted. They'll be quite thespian, quite dramatic, whereas others will put much less of an onus on the players to speak as their characters. You'll very rarely get them actually talking in character. They'll just say, my character does this, rather than speaking as their character. Some will really dive deep into game mechanics, present kind of puzzles which the players have to solve, whereas others will be much more story-focused and just kind of let all that slide. They'll just kind of get the mechanics out of the way as quickly as possible. Some will stick rigidly to one genre, others will really mix and match, or the genre will develop as the story develops. Some will focus on one core group of player characters or PCs, and others will have much more of a rotating roster. Some will some campaigns will tell deeply involved epic stories, and others will have very little continuity between sessions, much more of a Monster of the Week style, like X-Files or something like that. And all of this is possible, and all of this is encouraged, implicitly or explicitly. What does D&D mean to me, and what does being a critter mean to me? So I'm a fan of Critical Role. I'm a member of that community. And that really leads into what D&D means to me. If I had to boil it down to one word, it would be community. I am a very creative and a very gregarious person, and D&D scratches both of those itches. It gives me groups of like-minded people to connect with, and a reason to connect with those people. I'm also a lover of like strategy games and music and other like logic adjacent activities. So D&D is good for that as well, because there is a mathsy game in there with lots of moving parts that you connect together, and I find that very engaging, very fulfilling. Without going into too many details as well, university was a very difficult time for me. Roleplay and RPGs and Dungeons & Dragons were an escape and a sanctuary for me then. They helped me through some very difficult times, and I'm not sure I would have managed without them.
I am a content creator and curator for the Australian government, for one of the departments here.
What does it mean to be a critter to you, and like how has that impacted your life?
Critical Role is, I think it's fair to say, the prime mover for the current renaissance of Dungeons & Dragons. The show, what does it mean to be a critter? Like any other fandom, the critters are engaged in the show, in the thing that they all share their interest about, like being a fan of a sports team or a fan of a television show. anybody who is engaged in that shared activity is interested in what's happened most recently. They want to talk about what the impact of what they've seen this week is, what it might mean for the future. There are people who analyze what happened and how things might have gone differently. And if I'd been involved, I would have done something quite different. And who speculate about what might happen in the future based on what's happened today. Like any other fandom, people who are enthusiastic and passionate about the thing that they're sharing their interest in. For me, it's, as I said, a connection between people. I have always been an introverted kind of person, and I find it difficult to meet like-minded people. So this game provides a framework in which people who share an interest in the same thing can get together around a table and interact. Here I am talking with somebody on the other side of the world that I've never met before, who introduced himself to me through a digital forum because of the Critical Role television show, internet phenomenon. For me personally, the connection that D&D has made a big change for me is in my own children. I'm a non-custodial father, and my children live with their mother in a different part of the country. I see them maybe twice a year. So it's been very difficult for me to build that relationship, familial relationship between myself and my children. And the game provided a framework whereby we had a common activity, and we got to adventure in the world of my own creating. I got to give them things to do, see them make choices and play adventures in a safe environment in a way that I could perhaps impart a little of my fatherly advice that I would not otherwise have had the opportunity to give. So for me, it's been a terrific way of bringing my family closer together. And it's a way of meeting people that I would not normally meet and playing games and having fun.
What is your current job?
I do not work at the moment. Critical Role is amazing. I think everybody should watch it. It is a good thing to watch if you are getting the D&D, because you can get a very good idea of what you can do and the things that you make up. Like, I read people's stories all the time on the Critical Role fan page or Critical Role cosplay. I'm like thousands of the groups. I'm even in a mental health group and everything of Critical Role. Like, hearing these people's stories of how it helped their mental health or how it helped them in general. Like, I don't remember his name. He's been talking a lot on the groups. He was homeless, and he was down to his last pit, and D&D was a big impact on my life. It brought me and other people together, and including two of our teachers that DM'd for us in high school. And it was a lot of fun. And I always wanted to keep going. But unfortunately, after we graduated, it came to an end.
What is your current occupation? Well, I work at a car wash. What does D&D mean to you? Oh, wow. It's very hard to explain. For the last 2 years, my life has been very complicated, and let's say I've gone through a very, very rough time. I was homeless for 7 months, and what would keep my spirits up would be using my phone every Thursday night and watch Critical Role, which is a Dungeons & Dragons web series, which is live. And when I wouldn't be able to catch it live, I would wait until the next Monday and watch it on my phone. I was homeless, but I was pretty smart. I would use the free Wi-Fi from Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, even after they were closed, to watch the show, because the show is at 10 o'clock, and usually by then Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts are closed. But if you're outside and you have a phone that's charged, you get to watch the show. Well, I did. What does it mean to a critter? Oh, wow. Like I said earlier, Critical Role means a great deal to me. At the end, I mean, almost 3 years ago, my wife was ill. And during that time, that's when I watched Critical Role even more. And during that time, well, she was in a hospital, then passed away in January of 2015. I started having a depression, very, very deep depression. And what would sometimes, well, pretty much every week, bring my depression. How can I explain this? Keep me from getting more depressed would be watching Critical Role, because I could forget about everything. I would immerse myself into the show, watching these wonderful people play these great characters, and I would forget about my depression. I would forget about the place where my mind was, which was very dark at the time, and it kept me from doing something stupid for a long time. Unfortunately, at one point, I did something stupid, and then I became homeless. And during my my 7 months of being homeless, I watched Critical Role, which helped me survive. And right now, I'm no longer on the streets, but I keep watching Critical Role because it continues to help me. It has continued to help me keep my spirits up, because whenever I watch it, I forget about my problems, and it's a great release and a great escape.
Bidet and be pleased.